Hello, everybody. Welcome to Renew Canada's InfraIntelligence series. Thanks for joining us today. Before we get started, I just want to give you a little bit of a landscape check on where you are on Crowdcast. Obviously, you can see everybody's checking in on the right-hand side with the chat. Feel free to do the same and let everybody know who you are, where you're from. Also, right above that, you'll see the actual media icon, and you can click on follow that. So that you continue to be updated on our InfraIntelligence series. And down below, you'll see how many people are in the room and our polls, which we'll get to at some point, or if you're getting bored with what we're talking about, you can go in and fill those in. And obviously ask a question. This is what it's all about. The panelists are here to have a discussion about the digital age of construction, and your questions in the Ask a Question section would be appreciated. So, as mentioned, this is the third in our six-part series for the first half of 2021. The first in January, we talked about building energy solutions. The second, last month, was about green infrastructure and natural assets. And today, as I mentioned, we're going to go all digital with a discussion about how our industry is or isn't adopting technology to build better, faster, and more efficiently. But before I introduce our panelists today, I'd just like you all to consider that everything used in construction and infrastructure comes from our earth, air, and water. So let's take a minute to acknowledge the many First Nations and Indigenous peoples of Canada as the original stewards of this great country and the resources we use and enjoy. I'm in Toronto, which is in the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Okay, so now we're going to get started, and we're going to call our panelists to the screen. I'm going to call each to the screen, and then instead of doing a long bio, I'm going to have them, once everybody's on screen, go around and introduce themselves and provide a couple of minutes or a minute about themselves and what they do and this topic. So first joining me right now is Ahmed Badruddin. He's the CEO of Citylytics. And next up on screen will be Anna Roback. She's the Director of Research and Innovation with WSP Canada. Welcome, Ahmed and Anna. And third panelist today is Richard Lyle. He's the President of ResCon, and he's on the Ontario Construction Advisory Panel. Good to see you there, Richard. And our final panelist today, John Rebel. He's the Chief Building Official with the City of Windsor. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Get started here. Why don't I go around in order of everybody introduction, and you can just say a couple words about who you are, what you do, and your relevance to the topic of digital age of construction. Start with you, Ahmed.
Thank you, Todd. Great to be here. I'm CEO of Citylytics. We're essentially a data company. We specialize in predictive intelligence on North American infrastructure markets. Essentially work with business leaders in the infrastructure space and looking to do business development in a much more data-driven and more proactive way. Our technology scans over 31,000 cities and utilities across North America for any data they're publishing, from council minutes to budgets, capital plans, compliant databases. Essentially, we triangulate all that data to look for early-stage intelligence on infrastructure needs, issues, opportunities, and using proprietary software tools and expert analysts. And our customers are typically the largest solution providers in the infrastructure space.
Thanks, Ahmed. Anna?
Thanks, Todd. I am from WSP Canada. We have about 7,000 staff across Canada and 50,000 globally. So we're a little company who does an awful lot of design and advice and stuff around the periphery of construction. While we don't do it directly, there's certainly a lot of the smart side that we're into. And we recently did some research into what are some of the smart solutions for construction in particular, and what are some of the barriers to adopting. So it aligns really well with this topic.
Excellent. Looking forward to diving into that a little bit more. Richard.
Yeah, hi. Richard Lyle. I'm the president of ResCon, which is a builder developer council based in Ontario. We're basically involved in anything that has to do with building buildings. Digitization has been a long interest of ours. We've got a partnership with U of T Engineering where we've done and commissioned quite a bit of research and other things related to streamlining the process overall, the building and development permits approvals process. We have released a number of reports on that. We're one of the principals behind an initiative called One Ontario, which concerns largely e-permitting, but it's actually more than that. And a big starting point for that, where we're in the midst of discussions with Treasury Board in Ontario and the Ministry of Housing, is setting up a data exchange platform. So different entities, municipalities, organizations that relative to applicable laws can all plug into the system and share data. So we've been hard at work on this. Got lots to say, probably not enough time, but good to be here.
We'll definitely get into that some more. John.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Todd. So my name is John Revelle. I'm the CBO of the City of Windsor, Chief Building Official. I've been the CBO since 2014. Windsor is 9th largest municipality in Ontario. We have a little over 218,000 population, being one of the gateway communities from the United States with the Ambassador Bridge and soon to be Gordie Howe Bridge. We've got a lot of construction happening, and our entire region is roughly 500,000 people. So it's a fairly urban area with some rural around us. So it's interesting. We have within the city, we have $360 million annually in construction. So we're roughly issuing 4,000 permits. And we undertook a project to move from paper to paperless a couple of years ago, and we're continuing that process. So I'll be glad to participate here and talk about it a little more, Todd.
Thank you. Well, that's a great segue, because that's one of the questions I was going to ask is let's talk about permitting and approvals. I think in our early conversations before we got set up for today, it was mentioned that City of Windsor was one of the first adopters of the eVolta cloud permitting system. So can you tell us a little bit about how cloud permitting works and how it works for municipalities and engineers and consultants?
Sure. Yeah. So just to give you a little bit of history, eVolta was a Finnish company, and they had created this electronic system for issuing permits, doing inspections, sort of the whole gamut of the construction process in Finland. And it had worked really well. The Finnish government had encouraged this. They had brought together a number of players and helped create the platform. So when we started thinking about going digital and started to look around, what we found was that there was a number of different options. A lot of them were project management type systems that had been prepared and were being reused as for issuing permits and doing other things. So there was sort of a static base that were being recrafted. The eVolta system was a little bit different, and it was a customized product that was specifically for the construction industry. So we really liked what we saw with that, and we thought that it might be a good opportunity to take us to the next level, take us electronic. And so we started a partnership with eVolta. eVolta has now moved to Canada. They've set up a headquarters here in Toronto, and they've relabeled themselves as Cloud Permit. But basically, as the first community in, we've been working with them to help create the system. So it's a completely new system that's been brought to Canada, and it's tailored to the Ontario construction process. So there's a big delta between what Finland has versus Ontario. In Ontario, we're more bottom up. So we have a lot of different players that we're trying to bring together, different consulting agencies. So conservation authorities, ministries that all need to come together and approve a construction or development project. It's much more streamlined in Finland. It's much more top down. And the building department takes the lead there, even in terms of planning process, zoning. So Ontario was a little bit different. So that's why we had to sort of start from scratch and create a brand new system. and that's still in process. It's very near completion, as a lot of communities are starting to use it. In Ontario, we're putting some finishing touches on adding more functionality to it. In Windsor, it's slowly going live with that cloud permit. Prior to that, we had developed an in-house solution that was just basically a web-based application process. So the cloud permit is for us the next step. Something that's great for our customers. It's what the industry wanted. They'll be able to make payments. We include other commenting agencies, chat back and forth, do inspections, record everything, store drawings. So it's sort of one universal cloud-based format that anybody can access when you get the appropriate credentials and login. It's secure, and it's much more intuitive, provides feedback, and the communication tool is really going to be a great thing for our industry.
I think we're seeing a lot, obviously with the pandemic, everybody's doing Zoom calls and webinars like these, but I think you're also seeing people move to more electronic means of communicating and organizing their projects. And data is a big part of that. So, Richard, I want to get to you and Anna on how you're doing permitting from your perspective, and how tools you're using. But let's talk about the data that goes into that first. So John, you've got electronic permitting, and you've got all these resources that you're trying to get together for a collaborative sign-off on these projects. I'm going to ask Ahmed to talk about what data goes into that, do you think, and how are successful organizations and firms using data? Can you try to put these two pieces together?
Yeah, sure. I think that trend of more digitization and data availability is skyrocketing in general public sector, because now you've got to provide these services and have alternative ways to do it in much more lower human touch ways, and that's driving some of the digitization as well. Our focus around that data piece of it is, for example, we aggregate data from permit databases across the U.S. and we're looking for early stage intelligence around what trends can we see more market wide. That's been our focus. And so I'd say to your question around companies that are using it and how they're using it, generally it starts with a clear goal, like what they want to do with the data, and a clear understanding of what kind of data they need. Because sometimes you can have a business goal, but then there may not be data to support it, or you might have data that doesn't align with the ultimate business goal. So you kind of have to attack it at both angles, and then look at what implication it has on workflows and processes, adoption, how you get it adopted as well, because there's a lot of behavior change as well. Typically, the most successful way is to start small, start with one area where you can have some defined needs, defined scope, get some successes, and then start scaling it further.
Okay. So back to you, Richard, and I'll get to you too, as Anna, like from a construction industry perspective, how are you seeing data being used and, electronic cloud-based systems being applied in projects?
Well, it varies by company and by jurisdiction, of course. I applaud Windsor for being at the cutting edge of this, because it's a very difficult challenge to undertake. When we were looking at different systems globally, we also pay particular attention to the actual transition to a database platform for this kind of work. For example, Singapore, which has been a leader in this area, when they hit the switch, they realized that industry wasn't up to snuff too, so they had to set up consulting services to assist industry with learning how to use these tools. But they are fantastic tools, and it can be done. And we know that when we look at the Ontario-Canadian experience, we know, for example, that we still don't have a BIM mandate in Canada. We know that the World Bank ranks us at 64th in construction permitting in the world. And we know that when you look at housing and infrastructure projects from a supply chain perspective, if you look at the preponderance of governmental bodies and agencies, often subject to applicable laws, of course, that are involved there, we counted up to 45. So if that process isn't working smoothly, then you lose time. And if you lose time, you lose money. And so, you know, a very important part of this whole exercise is really de-risking the development process, which is critical, especially with respect to any private sector-based investment. You know, you need to know when you're going to get done, when you're going to get approved, and what the numbers look like. And the harder it is to measure those things, the higher the risk is going to be for any proponent or any investor in a project. So, for example, we believe and have believed for some time that systemically a big part of the housing supply problem is the lack of predictability and accountability in the process.
Yeah, so I mean, we don't want to get into a political conversation here.
No. I didn't mean that to be political. We're actually looking at this as being sort of helpful. I mean, we live in a data world. We know that there are tools that are available to us. We know that there are jurisdictions that are more advanced than we are. We know this can work. We just need to get to it as quickly as we can. And that's getting organized. And of course, it's very complicated. There's nothing more complicated really than when you talk about the building and development industry with respect to approval. So there's a lot of moving parts here and a lot of different players, and you have to bring them together. But that's why that One Ontario initiative is so good, because we've got over 20 organizations and entities, including the planners, the building officials, the builders, and whatever. We're all saying, hey, we want to do this. This is going to make things better. We need to have that data exchange capability for that interoperability between systems and between the relative differences in different jurisdictions, different municipalities, how sophisticated they are, and that kind of thing. So we can actually plug in and share the data. That's step number one. There's lots of service providers out there, and you know, Cloud Permit being a great example. You know, we wrote a dumb blog, a silly blog out of our office, and a week later we were contacted by this group from Finland, and a week after that they were in Ontario, and a week after that we had a meeting with the Secretary to Cabinet. That's how quickly things can move. But when you get into how people work and changing how they work and utilizing data and systems and so on, that takes longer, of course. And there's a lot of fear and things in there. But anyways.
So that's where human nature comes in, just the fear of change and the change management process. So Anna, over to you on the innovation piece. You're director of research and innovation at WSP, and obviously you're seeing a lot of these technology trends. How are you seeing them being actually adopted on projects? Or not?
Yeah,
yes.
or not. So it is really interesting because we have the opportunity to see both how things are being done within construction, but also our own staff taking on technology or not taking on technology. So we have, as part of our innovation program, we have a piece called Production Through Technology, which is all about just our own staff getting to know the full potential of the tools we already have, and then starting to use machine learning and AI, you know, starting to streamline processes. So it's quite a journey, and you know, part of it is how do we get industry to adopt, but part of it is also internally, how do we get our own people to adopt these things? And that's, I'm not just saying that about WSP, that's everyone. It's always a challenge. So maybe I'll take a step back and explain the research that we did, because that brings a little bit more context to what I'm about to say. The research was a marriage of our SMART and Future Ready programs. So Future Ready is about looking at trends, which are looking not like a current trend, but what's going to happen 10, 20, 30 years from now in terms of technology, but also climate, resources, and society. So in this research piece, we were looking at what are the costs to Canada over the next 10 years, just the next 10 years in those 4 trend categories. And then what are some of the smart solutions that we have available to us to help us predict, prepare for, design against all of those things. And then the big interesting one for me was, well, what are our barriers to this? Because I know from my background in asset management, and frankly, anyone who works with people knows that there are going to be barriers to implementing new technology and new solutions. And so what we found in this research, first of all of these trends are going to cause an increase in not only the number of construction projects taking place, but also the cost of construction, which probably doesn't come as a huge surprise. But you can also imagine within that, there's the opportunity for smart solutions to kind of work against that massive increase. And I'll just explain what I mean by both those dimensions of increasing the number of projects with an aging population. There's one of our society pieces. We're going to need to build things that are more age friendly for a range of ages. With increasing heat and flooding, our infrastructure is going to fail faster, fail sooner. Therefore, we're going to have to replace it sooner. So you can start to see how that's going to add up to more construction is going to be happening. And then in terms of the cost of each construction project, I'll again just point to the aging population because not only are people aging out and we have to train the next generation, but we also have people are going to be looking after their aging parents. So you can start to see how this is all compounding. I'll do the final trend thing, even though we had about 12 of them, which is around heat. This is going to have a massive impact on our construction industry because I think it's around 3.6 billion a year that it's going to start costing our economy just to deal with worker productivity related to heat. So you can start to see this all kind of coming together into a massive, I won't call it quite a train wreck opportunity to bring in more smart solutions. I think I'll leave it at that because I suspect that the group has a lot of things amongst them where they can raise some really interesting smart solutions related to that. But the final piece that I'll say is when we went out to industry and interviewed people on what do you think the solutions are to these? Of course, there's plenty of barriers and we'll all talk about those, I'm sure. But the two main solutions people raised were that individuals have to do something about this. They've never seen anything big go through without a strong champion. And government has to do something about this because without regulation, legislation, we just don't have the right incentives in place to bring forward the smartest solutions and connected and collaborative solutions that we can.
So, I mean, those are great points. I mean, we're really trying to get to information-based decision-making, right? So I'm fascinated about the heat comment. I guess that's a result of climate change and workplaces and construction sites being hotter during construction season. So, Ahmed, I'll go back to you on do you gather data on heat around project sites? Or can you maybe give us a little more insight as to what data sets most of the construction and infrastructure industry are working with?
Yeah, good question. I wanted to maybe back it up a little bit too, just based on some of the comments that were made. I mean, the ideal world is all this data exists, all the systems work together, and all the systems can talk to each other. What we found was that there's a lot of data that already exists. It's just not connected, it's buried and siloed, thousands of disparate sources, thousands of different formats, heat being one element of it. And where we saw an opportunity for software tools and technology was how do you use these algorithms to pull all that data together so the industry can start making some better decisions around what's going on in the infrastructure market and where the issues are, what is going to be spent, what needs to be spent. So our approach was more, how do we make more use the data that already exists and leverage that as a starting point, and then start looking at how do we find more data sources to plug into the system. So, because I do think that there's a lot of data that already exists that can be harnessed. That is true for a lot of companies.
So John, on the data side, are you obviously you're asset management friendly because I know Melissa Osborne of your group, who's the asset manager there, and Anna comes from asset management. I think where Ahmed is going is this data is part of your asset management tool, like condition assessment and life cycle. So are you integrating that into some of your platforms?
Yeah, absolutely, Todd. And I'll even throw out an example of one of the things we're trying to work towards in the future is even with the fire department. We had an issue in Windsor where we had a building that caught on fire and the fire department responded and they put firefighters in an underground space that was actually structurally compromised. And the fire chief made the comment afterwards that he wished he had quick access to drawings for that building because he would have never put his firefighters. So speaks to Ahmed's point about data and having it accessible quickly. If this is cloud-based and it's something we can provide to the fire department, their first responders en route could be bringing it up on a tablet and looking at structural drawings.
Good analysis. So Richard, I mean, there's been a few comments. I'm sure you've got something to say about each one of them.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's so many different potential and real benefits that can be derived from this, not the least of which one of the things that we were looking at was a research project utilizing drones and sensors where on any given day you would have an up-to-date set of as-built drawings as a project is progressing. Which for those in the industry who know that sometimes you might not get as-built drawings at the end of the day, or it can take some time. But you know, these things have safety. There are safety considerations too, and that's a really great example with respect to the firefighters. And you know, the other thing is just efficiencies and you know some good things for the environment. Just at a very practical level, you won't have that problem of losing drawings anymore. You know, this kind of thing. And you can actually trigger reviews, simultaneous reviews, rather than linear chicken and egg games and things like that, that can occur. And then, you know, we spend millions, hundreds of millions of dollars every year reproducing drawings, many of which end up in a big bin. They never get really used, but we're reproducing tons of paper. It's really all unnecessary. So. But the question is, how do you get there and how do you move things along? And part of that, and somebody mentioned it, is where's the incentive, or is there a lack of incentive for certain parties not to proceed because there really is no consequence if you make things better or not. So that can really have a chilling effect. And then there's of course the fear factor. One of the interesting things in Finland was in their experience there was a fear factor on the part of staff, you know, that their jobs were going to change and so on and so forth. But what they found out afterwards is that the technology enabled eliminating some of the drudgery in their work. And so they could actually spend their time looking at more interesting things and doing more interesting work. So it actually had a positive effect there from an HR perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned drone technology and sensors. And that was kind of one of my questions. My cousin is in construction, and he was telling me that there's actually barcodes on construction workers' top of their helmets, and there is cameras and sensor technology on the cranes, so you can tell where everybody is on the job site at any time to really kind of not only keep track from a health and safety point of view, but also make sure that people are in the right places at the right time doing the right things for construction efficiency. I was blown away. I didn't realize that technology had advanced to that point. So curious if that's actually something that's used on most projects. Maybe Anna, you can chat to that from a WSP perspective. I'm not sure if that sensor and drone technology is truly being used on sites.
Yeah, I don't know that it's being used on most projects, but that is that's a really good one. And it just made me think of all these others that there's a particular niche when we looked at all the different types of technologies on a construction site and the kind of impact that they had for the productivity of that site and, the construction timeline as well as costs. And real-time location systems, cameras, RFID, all those. So I assume the drones and sensors would come into that as well. They can save up to 60% of labor costs. They can cut a construction timeline by about 30% just with that real-time location system piece. So it's super impressive, and the potential for that and more technology like that is huge. The safety point is really important. And when you mentioned there's, I guess, keeping staff safe even before they get onto the construction site, training them through an augmented or virtual reality environment before they even get there has massive potential as well to just, it's not just productivity, but it's worker safety, comfort. They're feeling as they even move around the site, they're already ready for it. So those are kind of technologies that I've seen at least reported on quite a lot, and that's the kind of result that you're seeing from them.
So Ahmed, all this data is being captured. We've got cloud-based systems that are chewing up terabytes of data. How are you mining that? What do you do with that? And can you turn it into something that other people can use?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, and I wanted to build also what Anna was saying. One of sometimes the challenges that the individuals in the organization making the decisions about these are different from the ones at the end of the day using it. And that sometimes creates some adoption challenges as well. So I think one thing that's important is understanding that user workflow, like what do people do today? And beyond there's going to be the business or organizational benefits, but also for that person at the end of using the data, the platform, how is it going to improve their workflows, and how are they going to be able to do more interesting things with the data? So I think that's always something to overcome early on, and just requires understanding what exact data point is going to be useful for them to make a certain decision or a certain action. In terms of how we're mining it, our data, our approach is a little different. We're looking at from 31,000 cities and utilities, any public sources, public data sets, public documents, government, state level, county level, provincial level data sets, anything in that public domain that's already being created by public sector, but it's not fully utilized by the industry. And what our goal is connecting it all into our centralized platform, and how we use it. We've got, some web crawling technology, some data scraping technology, data ingestion technologies. And the other challenge is how do you normalize it, because provinces might have different units for different things that they measure. So creating some standardization around that, and then normalizing in a way that we can do some more apples to apple benchmarks, and then creating that interface for users based on what they're looking for. And everyone has a slightly different, call it slice of data they're looking for. What one company cares about will be very different from other companies care about. So it's a matter of understanding, one element of this pulling the data together in the platform, but also how is it going to be used and what's the best way? Because you don't want to overwhelm the users too with like all kinds of data. You want to give them something simple that is powerful, that enables them to do something that they couldn't do themselves easily before.
Yeah, so, you can have lots of data, but if you don't use it, it's
just numbers, right? Yeah, it's numbers at the end of the day.
I'm going to get into one of the questions we have here now, which is a good one. I think it goes back to maybe a little bit of the political influence around what we're trying to achieve with digitization of the industry. What government regulations and policies would effectively support and expedite the adoption of digital solutions and smart solutions for the construction industry? In other words, is the government at all levels supporting this trend? And maybe start with you, Richard, because ResCon I know is a pretty powerful lobbying organization in Ontario.
Yeah, sure. First, I'll say I was very pleased and we were very happy about the Government of Ontario announcing that there is now a minister responsible for data and digitization. And that was the same person as the President of Treasury Board, who is now our Minister of Finance. So, but the good news there is that with that coming from that source, said to us that the government's serious about doing things here, and there's a lot that can be done, and they've established some programs. I think there's a big learning curve here because you've got a lot of people that for example, that think, yeah, we do e-permitting. For example, we can accept applications by email. Well, that's not e-permitting. And sometimes you've got different people at different levels of knowledge here. And I'm not making fun of anybody. It's just the reality of it. So I think there's some pretty mandatory things that should happen. And then when you're talking about linking all these different, creating the platform so you can link all these different entities together so they can exchange and share data in a secure way is critical. But, there's some very good models out there. The Estonian digital identity model, and I don't know if anybody read that, but Estonia, 97% of all the interaction between the public and government is online. So when COVID hit, they didn't skip a beat. And you know, we can do that as well too. There's no reason for it. It's just a matter of time, effort, commitment, and training, you know, and pulling that together.
So John, over to you. I mean, you're with the municipality. What do you see the role of your level of government in terms of driving this process?
So it's maybe back to one of the comments that Anna made earlier. It requires some championing because at the municipal level, you're working with a group of individuals who don't all have the same understanding of what the benefits are, and you're competing against other priorities. So it's a matter of putting together a group of people who can understand what it is and can advocate for, so that the political leadership is willing to make the investment. City of Windsor has spent, we're in the range of around $2 million so far to transition to an electronic system. It's a tremendous amount of work, and it's involved a number of different departments. Right now, we've got our IT department, our planning department, and our public works division working together with building to put together this very robust platform for all of the users. I will say more at a province-wide scale, though, one of the greatest hurdles we have is identifying people. We don't have a uniform identification system for individuals. And that's one of the advantages that Finland had. They have they use their banking system for identifying individuals. So you have an account number for each individual, and it doesn't matter who you bank with in Finland. You use the same account number, and it's tracked by the government. So it was very easy for them to identify individuals so that you can have people participating who are appropriate to be participating or have access to the information and data in the cloud system. We don't have that advantage here in Ontario. It's very fragmented, and there's no uniform system. So that's one of the great challenges, identifying individuals.
So the government's role is really to try to pull together those disparate silos of not only data sets but policy. So Anna and Ahmed, any comments on how governments can help drive the digitization of the construction industry?
Yeah, if you don't mind if I share. Yeah, there's for sure there's the procurement side, right? Make sure that procurement allows innovation and doesn't just go all cost first in the short term. Because when you tend to do this life cycle costing, as much as we like to take it into account what's happening in the future, we just, you know, it gets so small with the discount rate, right? So and plus you often don't have the same end user that is building the thing in the first place or developing the building in the first place. And so a policy there that would require procurement or allow procurement to be more flexible, less specification, less prescription based, that would allow new players to come into the market, do things a little bit differently, allows a little bit of risk, and that all sounds pretty crazy, I suppose. The other piece that the government's starting to do, I'm seeing in pockets, is supporting pilot projects. Pilot projects, there's nothing like a pilot project to get things moving. In the research that I've seen on what makes people adopt something new, every single time, whether it's purchasing a green product, allowing your private data to be used, recommending a new drug for your patients, every single time, the person that has made the decision has looked at what someone else has done. So the pilot project gives that first instance of somebody doing something and showing it being successful or not, and the lessons learned that come from it. So I think those are two of the biggest things that government could support. And I'm just going to go back, though, to the life cycle piece, because a policy that allows us to internalize externalities, and when I say externalities, I'm back to the whole concept of somebody builds something, but someone else is going to incur the cost of that thing if they're passing it on. Someone builds something now, but the future stuff that happens just seems really small to us. And so that becomes a kind of externality too. So if there's a policy that brings that all together into the now, into the, I'm going to do something that's going to impact somebody else, but let me pay for it. let that be part of the whole package up front. That's the kind of policy that I think would support.
All right.
Yeah, I was actually going to say the second point Anna brought up, which is piloting, because when you think about any transformative technology, GPS, internet, it all started with some public sector government applications where governments were wanted to try it out, wanted to use it. They were a bit more hands-on with it, and then the learnings from that then became much more widely available, accessible to other industries as well. So more maybe hands-on piloting of different technologies and sharing those learnings, I think, is going to help accelerate this adoption.
Yeah, so nobody wants to be the first mover on these things, right? Everybody wants to be able to point to an example where it's worked before, so that you don't look silly being the first one that tried and fell on your face with whatever technology adoption. And so, kudos to John, you and the city for adopting the VOLTA system and moving to cloud permitting. But maybe, Richard, you can tell us a little bit more about pilots. And I think this is a good area to talk about, like who's doing some really cool stuff beyond the city of Windsor. Obviously, who else is doing good things with adopting technology in the construction sector?
Wow, well, that's a big question. I'm not sure exactly where to start on that. I was going to say one thing that depending on the jurisdiction and how things work, like for example in Ontario, we brought in an Ontario building code in 1975 to create a common understanding between all the 400, probably closer to 500 municipalities or 600 now. I think there's 444 in the province, that they all work off the same system. And I think that with digitization, digital platforms and so on, we need that same level of engagement. Because you can avoid, for example, municipalities doing different things at different levels and spending money on consultants to actually create data exchange capabilities that are, one-off jobs, and we can actually sort of do that. So I think, we don't have a Ministry of Construction, but what we could really use is some kind of established cooperative venture involving government and industry and the design community to oversee this transition, because there's so many moving parts to it, but at the same time, it's so important. We ran some big data analytics using agent-based modeling, looking at what it would mean if we streamline the approvals process for a period of time, what that would mean with respect to the supply of housing. And the numbers were astounding. We also looked at what it would mean for tax revenues for government, because the development industry, actually, it's not very high on the list of popular entities in the world, right? So we looked at that too to see, and of course, it came together. You get a lot more housing, governments get more revenues, people live better. I mean, what's wrong with that? So we're seeing different levels. Obviously, bigger organizations are more attuned to all this stuff. Part of our UFT engineering collaboration is now an annual BIM survey in Canada that's performed. I think we just did the third one. So it's showing a progressive increase with respect to different entities at different levels of sophistication. So, architects are typically way up there. Then you get the engineers, don't tell them I said that. And then you have, you then get into government bodies and industry. And there's a push-pull effect here too. This is why things like BIM mandates are so important, because government really needs to say, okay, we expect you to get here by this time, right? You must do this. Or else it'll be, well, I'm not going to do it because the government doesn't require it. And then government's saying, well, I'm not going to ask them for this because they can't do it, right? That kind of thing. And then you have the, smaller players where the adjustment, you can't sort of assign a team to do the digitization work. It's like, who's going to do this? And it's, well, we don't know. So, but it's really, I think somebody mentioned top down. This is one of these top down things to really bring it together. That doesn't mean to say that you can't have the forerunners like the city of Windsor that really got ahead of this, and they were very incredibly brave about it. I mean, it was really quite astounding and admirable that the city undertook this challenge and has gotten to the point where there are other municipalities are now starting to follow. But we really do need that global positioning on this from the senior levels of government and even the federal government too.
So that kind of speaks to what Anna was saying with procurement, right? You really need somebody at that level to say, if you don't adhere to these digital permitting, all these other standards or technology pieces, then you don't qualify for the job. I think maybe we need to be a little more strict with procurement so those costs can be built in. So, when WSP goes in with a future ready kind of proposal, but yet another consultant who says, well, we're not really doing that technology stuff because our team doesn't know about it, they end up with the low bid. So how do we avoid that low bid ethos due to these increase in costs for data and the analytics and software? So I don't know, Anna, have you encountered that? Or Richard, maybe you want to go first with that?
I was just going to say just very quickly that, yes, there are costs associated to change, but then there are benefits with the change that reduce costs. So, where that, balances out at what point in time, that's for brighter minds than me to contemplate, but I'll look to WSP for guidance there. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, well, it is true. It's in the future, right? If it's not right now, and in fact, even if it's right now and people haven't seen it work before and they're not sure it's going to work, then it's too uncomfortable. And if it's in the future, we do have our, there's the economics discounts rates, but then there's people have different discount rates. Theirs are ridiculously high. Something that looks like a benefit cost of 10-to-1 economically, they see it as less than 1-to-1 because, they just see the value. Tomorrow's dollar is 50 cents as far as they're concerned because it's so far away. So that is a big challenge for sure.
I'm going to jump into our polls now. I don't know if you, as our panelists, have gone into the polls, but and also everybody who's in attendance, take a minute now to go in and answer those polls, and we're just going to go through them now. Maybe have a quick conversation about each one. And I'm going to fill them out myself as much as I can. These are good ones. I think panelists helped us with driving some of these. So let's start at the top. So the biggest barrier preventing technology adoption looks like lack of knowledge. So there you go, Ahmed. Big group of people who need more data so that they have access to the knowledge. So lack of knowledge, lack of information could maybe be perceived as the same thing. Fear of change, we talked about that before too. How do you adopt and the people factor, right? So that's interesting. How often do you use construction apps? Broad question, and I guess it's, do we go to engineers and architects, or are we going to, construction frontline workers? Looks like hardly ever as most of the people in this group. But Richard, quickly on this one, I mean, when you're on a construction site, are the contractors, are they on their phones checking apps for stuff or using technology live on site?
Yeah, and there's various levels of sophistication in that regard too as well. So it depends on the company, it depends on the project. We've got companies that have capabilities that far exceed anything that's being used currently. Plus, it's can be hard for some companies. The trades, I mentioned the builders being at one level, architects, engineers, builders, and then your trades are usually further down that list. So it's funny. I know of companies and suppliers in the design world that have fully BIMmed out capabilities, but their clients don't require it, so they don't use it. Mm-hmm. And of course, to get onto a complete BIM platform, you've got to, everyone's got to be on and familiar with and knows how to work with that whole process, so that, for example, if you have change orders and things like that that automatically run through the entire system seamlessly, which is pretty slick. You know, we're not there yet. So it depends. You know, we looked at it with respect to COVID. How do we, you know, tracking for safety purposes and this kind of thing, and knowing where people are. You know, and then you get into some privacy considerations, which are interesting. And, you know, people don't want to be tracked. They don't want to sign up. They don't want to, you know, whatever. So, you know, we've got some issues there too to deal with as well. So it's a bit of a dog's breakfast right now in terms of
we're getting there though, and more people are using it, and I think, you know, our pandemic has forced us all to be a little bit more digital savvy. So the next question on our poll was, are you making the most of data you collect? I think some people are probably embellishing the truth when they say, yes, we use it to make informed decisions every day, because I don't know if that's the, you know, the reality on the ground is somewhere probably in the two lower answers. But I mean, I'm going to give you a chance. Like, are you seeing that with some of your clients? Are they actually using the data?
Yeah, I guess to Richard's point, there's levels of sophistication as well, right? So there may be some surface level data that they're using at a high level, because at the end of the day, I mean, there will be some levels, but then the other factor might be the granularity of the data. Like, do they have the granularity they need to make much more intelligent decisions? That could be, you know, the question here. But, you know, in today's world, I think most people are aware, like, they can't ignore data, they can't ignore digital. And they're looking for smarter ways to use it, and they're probably using it in some form of spreadsheets and whatnot. But is it truly data pipelines, data streams, real-time predictive AI? That I don't think it's quite there yet.
Yeah, if I can hop onto that one. We've had some of our teams do these technology mapping exercises. It might be around a municipality, for example, and it's just striking every time. One department will not know about the technology another department has, and the potential for that technology to grab data that will be useful to them. It's been eye-opening every single time. So I do agree. I think a lot of municipalities for sure are using so much technology, but there's also bigger potential for them to use it even better.
To have it integrated, because they're using that technology in silos, and you know that as an asset manager, I see that too in our role with asset management and reporting on it. Is you'll have engineering that does their set of data, and then you've got accounting with their set of data, and then you've got the public works people who have got their own sort of pieces, and they're not integrated and combined. So that's fascinating. So next poll question: what areas of artificial intelligence and machine learning interest you the most? So AI for better design of buildings. I don't know how much AI we're using right now, but I think maybe it was Anna or Richard, you mentioned virtual reality to get people trained on before they go on site. I thought that was great. It's not really artificial intelligence, but
there's a really lovely example at the University of Waterloo has done this, and I suspect others have done it since, but using cameras and AI to watch what older workers, older tradespeople, how they move their bodies, because in all of their years of experience, they've learned how to move their bodies in a way that prevents injury or keeps them safe and healthy. It's something they would not be able to explain to anyone else, but with this AI and these cameras, they're able to monitor that movement and then train younger workers to move in a safer way. So it's a really fascinating use of direct application to construction, and again, around keeping workers healthy, safe, and then productive as well.
So when my grandfather told me to lift with your legs, now that's become an AI thing.
I don't know. You'd have to see. Maybe he's wrong.
Richard, am I wrong? Are you supposed to lift with your legs? You're not supposed to lift with your back, right?
Yeah, well, your grandfather told you that, but what he didn't tell you was he got someone else to do the heavy lifting for him.
So I think we're moving along with AI here.
One thing I was going to say just quickly, Todd, because I was just in a simulator room yesterday, of all things, with respect to a training program. So the potential here with all this technology and AI is learning, and it's a feedback loop into simulation too. So, you know, the data, the benefits and the promise of data and the proper use of data is the capacity to simulate projects quickly and to change them, and then to run the apps on you know, carbon effect, climate change issues, building envelope. You know, you can recalibrate the energy performance of structures almost instantly, say in a residential concept situation, but then also in training too. So simulators for training of different works. Like, for example, you know, we're trying to get young people into the skilled trades. Well, you've got these guidance departments in high schools. I can see a day when a kid would be able to go into the guidance department of high school, sit down or stand up. It'd be like Ready Player One, put on the helmet, get on the unidirectional platform, and he could actually, he or she could actually walk through different job sites that are, for all intents and purposes, you know, real, and they would be actual simulations, and get some exposure that way, because of course we know experiential learning is so critical. That's not going to get you all the way there, but that could get you 80 or 90% of the way there. So technologies like that, these can change so many different things. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. The final poll question was, and it's a pretty obvious one. I was surprised that 22% said no to this. Was, in light of the pandemic, has your company adopted new technology to drive efficiencies? And almost 80% said yes, but there are still some people who say no. So it goes back to those adoption patterns and who's adopting it, and are there champions at the higher level, both in the organization and the government, who are driving that top-down approach to get more people to lift it up in that technology side. We only have a few minutes left, so I thought what I'd do is I'd go around, give everybody a chance to answer this one big question. What does the future look like, 5, 10, 15 years from now? As a preamble to that, I don't know if you've seen the Netflix series called Alien Planets, but episode 4, it talks about way in the future, robots are building our infrastructure. And I'll just start with you, Ahmed, or maybe why don't we do it the opposite direction? John, we'll go with you first. What's the future of construction?
Yeah, so I think you're in the right vein. It probably will evolve in ways we haven't even begun to imagine. I've seen video clips of 3D printing of buildings. Like that's possibly a future direction that we could be going in. So certainly data collection, having more perfect information, and bringing all of the appropriate people together so they can work collaboratively. It helps us envision what could be in the future. So I think that there's unimagined directions that we could be going in. Good. Richard?
You know, one of the great challenges right now is that the technology is evolving faster than our capability of keeping up with it. And so we're getting a disconnect now, and unfortunately, and this is a juggernaut, it is going to roll, right? And necessity is going to drive change more than enlightened thinking, because all of a sudden we're going to realize, well, we're light years, we're 10 years or 15 years behind some other jurisdiction that we're trying to compete with. That's not going to work. The sad thing here, to a certain extent, is some people are going to get left behind in this world. The promise and the opportunities are fantastic for better designed buildings. This is going to be critical to manage climate change, and not just with respect to new buildings, but retrofitting old buildings. The technology that can be applied now and that is developing is going to really facilitate how to transform some of our existing structures into more climate friendly buildings, because that's 98-99% of our built environment is the existing stuff. You know, we can make all these changes to the new stuff. So the promise is fantastic. The challenges are great. There does need to be some top-down drivers here. We do need a BIM mandate. We need things like, you know, Todd, I know you know this, mass timber, most climate friendly thing going. we should have a mass timber mandate, right? I mean, things like that to drive that.
Okay.
Mandating offsite construction. You get a
Good.
better product.
Yeah, we need more of all of those. Anna, and then we'll give final word to Ahmed before we wrap up today.
All right. I'm gonna sound less exciting probably, but I think the future, this is aspirational, is that all organizations have a policy of piloting, of trying out new technologies, of collaborating with each other, of gathering an evidence base so that they know what's going to work and what's not, and sharing that with each other. But also that they have roles and responsibilities assigned to those things. You know, somebody has to go out and make those collaborations and meet those other organizations that have similar aspirations to them or similar desires to them. So that's the direction that I'd head in. And if you as an individual are going, man, this is, you know, there's so many solutions here, it's all very hard. I think that first step is, does your organization have a policy for these things that you think are important? That would be my first step.
Ahmed, what's the future look like?
Yeah, I'll say I'm optimistic. I feel like most of the companies we work with in the construction space, everyone's trying to figure out what to do with data, what to do with digital, how can it be incorporated in their businesses. I think we'll create, I believe what John said, unimaginable ways of being much more efficient about how we do business, how we create infrastructure. And I think it's exciting. The future is exciting.
Yes, it is, and we're going to adopt as quickly as we humanly can, because I think, to Richard's point, things are going to happen a lot faster than we can absorb. So thank you again, all of our panelists, and thank you to Citylytics for sponsoring this. Citylytics is providing lots of data intelligence, so go to their website and learn more about how you can use data in your organization. And we will see you all next time. The video will be live here for you to replay as soon as I wrap up. Next time, April 22nd. If you follow Actual Media up at the top there, you'll automatically get a notification for that. And we'll see you on April 22nd. We'll be talking about funding Indigenous mega projects, like the one behind me, which is not an Indigenous mega project. It's a hydroelectric facility, but we will be talking about Indigenous projects in our April 22nd webinar. So thank you again, everybody. Thank you to the panelists and Citylytics, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.